Welcome back to the Bitcoin Treasuries podcast. I'm Tim Kotzman. I'm here with Tyler Evans, the co-founder of BTC Inc. and Chief Investment Officer at UTXO Management. Tyler, thanks for joining us.
Nailed it, Tim. Really glad to be here. Quite an eventful Bitcoin Treasury Company week in New York.
Absolutely. Today was the Bitcoin Treasuries, Bitcoin Standard Investor Day something. Any takeaways from the conference or anyone you hadn't met before? Or
really great event hosted by Bitwise. So great representation from the market leaders here with Eric Semler and Michael Saylor both presenting on stage, and then had some really interesting conversations about folks from the traditional world. One guy I met, owns an automotive manufacturing company that he's working on listing in the U.S. and he plans to put 100% of their operating cash flow post-listing into Bitcoin. Already a big Bitcoiner himself. So
wow.
The Mayan virus is definitely spreading, especially with kind of the big headlines made this week by Cantor Fitzgerald and Tether with the launch of 21 Capital.
Yeah, that's really big news. The 42,000 or so Bitcoin they're going to start with would put them, I think, in position number two or three.
Two or three.
Something
it's
like that. It's
going to make the leaderboard a lot more competitive, which is a great thing.
Yeah, and the unique thing with Bitcoin is it kind of a rising tide sort of deal, right? It's like it can be competitive, right? It's like Jack Mallers versus Michael Saylor, but it's really kind of not like that in reality when you think through it.
I actually got to chat with Michael Saylor about it a little bit at the event, and he made the analogy I think is perfect, that if you're a real estate developer in Manhattan and someone else decides to come in and build a really nice property right next to yours, does that devalue your real estate? If anything, it's the opposite, where it's attracting more capital, more development, and you've got a more valuable neighborhood at the end of the day as more and more developers come in. And so that's exactly how he's thinking about it, and cheering on, really writing the playbook for everyone else to follow.
Yeah, it's a great analogy. Can you tell us about your background and your journey to Bitcoin and BTC Inc., and then maybe we'll go fast forward from there?
Yeah, it's been quite a wild ride. Since I got into Bitcoin, really in college, went to college, met my college buddy at the time, now turned co-founder of the last 11 years, David Bailey, and he was the one who got me and a handful of our friends in college who were all investing together, looking at stocks, talking about libertarian ideas at the time. And so, he really got bit by the Bitcoin bug hard in a very infectious way. And so, got into Bitcoin at that time, started investing a little bit as a broke college kid can. And by the time I was finishing my degree, had enough intellectual interest and seen the potential in terms of a very, very early but rising Bitcoin price to justify, going all in on Bitcoin and turning down my TradFi private equity job about a month before I was supposed to start.
Oh, wow.
To go all in on Bitcoin and launch, what was BTC Media at the time, now BTC Inc., alongside David. And so we really got our start educating people about Bitcoin. We were fresh out of college, no real world experience, no real skills. And so we thought, what's the way we can add value and spend time on this thing that we were so passionate about? And, we were already spending all of our time educating friends and family, kind of answering common misconceptions about, what is mining and what is a seed phrase? How does Bitcoin work? Why is it secure? Why does it have value? And so we decided to turn that into a publication, eventually a media company, to really just educate people in the early days about what Bitcoin was and why we thought it mattered. And, we used to talk back then about maybe someday a real Wall Street bank will enable their clients to buy Bitcoin. Little did we know, sitting here 11 years later, this space has just accelerated even faster than our wildest hopes and dreams at the time.
So are you saying that David Bailey orange pilled you?
He did. I might be like first or second person in the world that David orange pilled.
Wow. And yeah, we can get into the story, but he's orange pilled quite a few people. I get is putting it lightly, maybe.
He is a true visionary, and I think one of the best spokespeople for Bitcoin out there. And now he's orange pilled President Trump. So he's running all the way to the White House. Pretty wild.
Yeah. Wow. So what was BTC Media, now BTC Inc.? Like, how did it start? Can you take us through that journey of like from the beginning of that to, I guess, UTXO?
So, in the early days, we actually started out with a print publication. We thought for which sounds kind of backwards,
like pieces of paper,
pieces of paper in the mail. But we thought for this like digital industry that was very fringe thing on internet forums at the time, like we wanted to make it real, and so we figured a physical magazine that we spent a lot of money on at the time in our early days. So it was really glossy, high quality paper, really nice. Was like best way for us to legitimize Bitcoin and get people to take it seriously, have something that they could take home from a conference or event or leave on their coffee table. And hopefully actually spend the time to flip through and learn about Bitcoin. So we started a publication originally. Was originally called Why Bitcoin magazine with a Y. Now a relic of history. And then we really kind of hit our stride in 2015. We acquired Bitcoin magazine from Vitalik Buterin and a group of early operators, investors who are running that. And I met Vitalik when he was just, I think, a high school kid, was writing for Bitcoin magazine and was selling magazines out of his backpack at a pop-up folding table at an early Bitcoin conference in Canada. So, as he was writing, talking about ideas, working on smart contracts, what eventually became Ethereum.
So he was a Bitcoiner back then.
He was the editor-in-chief of Bitcoin magazine at the time.
Wow. Blast from the past.
No kidding. So as he spent more of his time working on Ethereum and smart contracts, we had the opportunity to acquire Bitcoin magazine, kind of take over stewardship of what we already thought was one of the most kind of historical brands, pieces of history, cultural icons of the Bitcoin community, even back in 2015. And so we acquired that, we relaunched it. We made a big push into digital publishing to grow the brand, into podcasts, research, social, and kind of just scaled up the media business as there were a lot more people who were receptive to learning about Bitcoin, and as kind of our audience grew. And it wasn't an easy straight line journey. We made lots of zigs and zags. All of our, you can flip through the early issues of Bitcoin magazine and Why Bitcoin, and you look at all the advertisers, all the mining companies that were our sponsors that helped us build the business at the time, and almost zero of them still exist today. A lot of great companies lost to history and consolidation in the mining industry, but it gave us enough momentum to keep growing the business. And then we really hit our stride when we got into the events business as a media company. And digital media is notoriously a terrible business. And I try to talk anyone I know who's starting a media company out of it, because it's a brutal business, especially in this day and age when attention and eyeballs are all commodified, and when you have so much centralization around the large platforms, Google and X and Meta, that are able to arbitrage all those eyeballs and attention and ad revenue. And so, getting into the in-person events was a huge piece of our strategy, both to build the in-person elements of the Bitcoin community. And there is something really special about just getting people together in person, and kind of the organic brainstorming, ideation, the relationships that are formed from that. And so we ran some small events, like starting in 2017, college towns in Nashville, where we're headquartered.
I was going to ask what year kind of the event stuff got started.
And that kind of culminated in us launching Bitcoin, the first ever annual Bitcoin conference, Bitcoin 2019, I believe, that we held in San Francisco. And, we'd done events about financial applications of blockchain, kind of enterprise blockchain stuff. Like we were also trying to understand where the real opportunity was. And it was unclear in those early days where was going to be kind of the best product market fit for this technology that, ton of venture capital dollars were flowing into by that point. But when we hosted Bitcoin 2019 and saw kind of the energy in the room, the developer enthusiasm, the retail enthusiasm, the institutional interest that it was just starting to peak at that time, we kind of made a very monumental business decision to go all in on Bitcoin and stop running events focused on kind of any other aspect of the technology, to limit our editorial coverage to Bitcoin exclusively, to really focus on, what 5-6 years into our journey, we had the most conviction on, that we knew we could build as a solid foundation for a business long term, and what we had the most personal conviction about. And I think that was one of the best decisions we ever made in our business. And so since we did that kind of in the media company, we saw tremendous growth, especially as, the media industry grew. We had a bunch of other great peers out there, like CoinDesk, that were very, very broad, but it's hard to be broad and go deep at the same time. And so we made the decision to just go deep on Bitcoin, and double down on Bitcoin events, on Bitcoin podcasts, on Bitcoin content, and that eventually led us into launching UTXO management in 2019, which was kind of our foray into Bitcoin asset management. Now that we had such a large network and audience, we've been educating people about Bitcoin for 5-6 years, and once they get over the hump, the inevitable question is, all right, like I get it now. I understand why this is valuable. Now, how can I go out and buy some, or where can I invest? And so we started UTXO to really answer that question, especially for our friends and family. And at that time, it was easier to buy Bitcoin. Coinbase was starting to really get some significant volumes and liquidities, but especially for high net worth investors, for family offices, for folks who were investing out of an IRA or a family trust or an LLC, it was still difficult to get Bitcoin exposure at the time. And so we started UTXO to really solve that problem for our friends and family and our network in Nashville, and kind of our core audience who were bought in on Bitcoin at the time, with a financial product where they could invest alongside us. They could leverage our expertise in the Bitcoin world, where we could keep them away from landmines and custodying it on some overseas exchange, especially, with the hangover from Mt. Gox and then Bitcoinica and then, FTX, all the number of custodians or exchanges that have failed over the years. So we wanted to build something where, we could really help them follow the best practices, get them Bitcoin exposure, and help them be diamond-handed holders of Bitcoin, high conviction, with us as kind of their trusted advisor to comfort them through the volatility and help them understand, the asymmetric upside that is really created by this asset class.
Bitcoin custody is evolving, and OnRamp leads this change with multi-institution custody, eliminating single points of failure. Instead of one institution or complex private keys, OnRamp secures your Bitcoin in a segregated, cold storage, multi-sig vault backed by 3 independent, institutional-grade custodians. No single custodian can move funds by themselves, providing an unprecedented level of security that traditional custody solutions simply can't match. Protected by a $100 million Lloyd's of London insurance policy, all transactions are fully auditable on-chain, never rehypothecated, and executed only at your explicit direction. This means complete transparency and control over your assets at all times. Beyond custody, OnRamp delivers comprehensive Bitcoin financial services, including lending, trading, inheritance planning, IRAs, and more. OnRamp functions as your private banking partner, coordinating key holder activity, removing technical burdens, and providing a personalized, trust-minimized experience tailored to your specific wealth preservation goals. Whether you're new to Bitcoin or an experienced holder, OnRamp's approach helps secure generational wealth with unmatched security and peace of mind. Visit onrampbitcoin.com today to learn more, sign up, or book a free consultation with their team of Bitcoin custody experts. Are you looking for comprehensive analytics on corporate Bitcoin adoption? Strategy Tracker delivers real-time insights into how companies are executing their Bitcoin strategies completely free. Monitor NAV premiums, cost basis performance, and track how corporate Bitcoin treasuries perform against the market. Upgrade to premium for just $3.99 a month and unlock exclusive benefits like detailed market rankings, real-time trading volume analysis, and advanced performance metrics for corporations embracing Bitcoin. Apply code KOTZ at checkout for 100% off your first month of premium. Strategy Tracker is your essential tool for measuring the effectiveness of corporate Bitcoin strategies. Visit strategytracker.com and gain the analytical edge in understanding the Bitcoin treasury phenomenon. Join us May 27th through the 29th for Bitcoin 2025 in Las Vegas. Use code KOTZ for 10% off tickets. So UTXO, when people hear UTXO management, did it start as like a service or a product or a fund? Like, what was the structure, and like, did you have to jump through hoops to qualify, or was it open to everybody? Or can you tell us kind of what specifically, how the structure of it was, I guess, or like what was it?
Yeah, so we
what was it? What is it?
Yeah, we started with a hedge fund vehicle, basically like a private fund for accredited investors, regulated here in the U.S. For folks to invest alongside as an evergreen vehicle to get that Bitcoin exposure in their portfolio. And so we've been running that fund for coming up on 6 years now, still out of that original fund, but have grown the portfolio significantly, have grown the sophistication of the strategies, and have really, diversified the investable landscape that we see within Bitcoin outside of just holding spot exposure into the world of financial products, Bitcoin treasury companies, derivatives, listed products like GBTC that have exploded over the last 6 years. So out of UTXO, we still run that liquid fund today. And then in 2023 or 24, we launched our very first venture fund out of UTXO as well to invest in kind of the next generation of entrepreneurs and builders building within the Bitcoin ecosystem, building the financial products, the custody solutions, the on-ramps, the payment rails, the settlement technology to really power a hyper Bitcoinization future.
Got it. So is there the venture fund that's kind of seeding and allocating capital to entrepreneurs, and then there's a fund that's kind of focused on Bitcoin treasury companies, or like how, or is it different buckets, or
Yeah, that's basically it,
Okay.
Tim, where we've got two funds, two strategies today. One that's private market venture capital strategy that's a closed-ended fund with a long-term fund life as we're early, like pre-seed and seed stage investors into startups building in the Bitcoin world. And then we've got the liquid vehicle, which is kind of our original flagship fund that really focuses on Bitcoin treasury companies today. We've got about 75 to 80% of the portfolio now allocated across Bitcoin standard companies, Bitcoin treasury companies, Bitcoin strategy companies, whatever you want to call them, in a number of different markets around the world.
Can you walk us through whatever you can share from the earlier days of the fund and what the strategy was? I know you mentioned GBTC, and then maybe take us through whatever you'd like to highlight. I know some of the international markets, maybe Metaplanet in particular, is kind of a very unique story. So whatever you'd like to share kind of from the couple years ago to today with any specific strategies or allocations that you kind of stand out to you.
Yeah, within that fund, I think what kind of really opened our eyes to this opportunity, and what was kind of the precursor to the Bitcoin treasury companies, was really the GBTC product run by Grayscale. And for those not familiar, it was a listed trust that effectively served as a proxy Bitcoin ETF in the very, very early days before there was a spot Bitcoin ETF available in the US. And so how that product worked is you could invest Bitcoin into the trust in exchange for shares of GBTC, which were traded on the OTC markets at the time. And because of the regulatory restrictions, when you created new shares, you had a 12-month, eventually a 6-month lockup on those private listed shares. But there was so much institutional capital demand for Bitcoin exposure, and GBTC was really the only product to service that demand. And so at the time, GBTC would trade at wild multiples of its net asset value of the Bitcoin it actually held. So it was trading, anywhere 3, 4, up to like 5 to 7x premium above the value of the Bitcoin.
It was like the original MNAVer.
It was, and it had a very juicy MNAV because, again, it was like very immature market. There was only one, listed product that was listed and regulated for institutional capital to express any exposure to Bitcoin. And so there was just this huge supply-demand imbalance there that was only exacerbated by the 6 or 12-month lockup restrictions on the shares. And so we saw kind of the blooming institutional interest expressed in this product, and we saw a way for us to sell $1 Bitcoin to public market investors for $3, $4, $5. And so we were very active in that trade. That was kind of one of the, I think it was one of the very first trades we put on when we launched UTXO. And we'd buy Bitcoin, we'd give that Bitcoin to Grayscale, we'd get the shares, we'd wait our 6 months until they were available for trading. We'd sell them in the open market on this institutional bid, and we'd take the capital and we'd go buy more Bitcoin and wait another 6 months. So we, effectively arbitraged that premium while it existed in the very, very early days, which was, a great way to earn like Bitcoin native yield. We had Bitcoin exposure the entire time, and we were able to generate, Bitcoin denominated returns on that capital. So that was really kind of the trade that opened our eyes to this institutional demand, kind of this TradFi to Bitcoin native arbitrage that existed. And then with GBTC, post 2022, when FTX collapsed, Genesis went bankrupt, BlockFi went bust, when the whole market took a massive downturn, that product flipped on GBTC, where what was trading at a big premium while markets were euphoric and bullish collapsed to a significant discount. And so we thankfully only had a little bit of exposure to that drawdown, but we really saw the opportunity again, like at the depths of that bear market, to buy GBTC now on the open market, where it was trading at a 45, 46, 48% discount to the value of the underlying Bitcoin in the trust. And so we loaded up the fund pretty aggressively, buying GBTC at those levels, with the expectation that eventually a US ETF would get approved and that discount would close naturally over time. We were heavy in GBTC there for a long time, kind of betting on the US ETFs, and played a pretty active role in making that happen. We kind of led an activist campaign with Grayscale to put more pressure on them to convert it to an ETF, to make sure that the shareholders' voices were heard for this product that was, trading at a massive discount, massive dislocation at the time. And then as, the market recovered in 2023, that discount started to close. And then as we got the launch of the US Bitcoin ETFs in January 2024, including Grayscale being able to convert to a spot ETF, that closed to zero, which was made for a fantastic year for us at the fund. So that was kind of like the genesis of the strategy and the original idea. And then, that's what really led us to discover and pay close attention to what Michael Saylor launched with MicroStrategy about 4 years ago, now Strategy, but where he saw that same essentially arbitrage inefficiency that existed in the capital markets, where there's pools of institutional capital that want access to Bitcoin as the best performing asset class of the last decade, but have a specific mandate or have restrictions around the types of securities, types of assets that they could hold. And so he really found a very unique, very creative, very risky at the time way to capture this arbitrage or this access asymmetry by using strategy to acquire the Bitcoin, essentially securitize it on his balance sheet, and then be able to sell securities to those institutional buyers who could only access, listed US equities, convertible bonds, corporate bonds, preferred shares, all these different forms of securities that Wall Street understands, has the plumbing for, can use as collateral, can build into a big model portfolio. And so we were, early investors in strategy as we saw that kind of really pick up steam and that be a new way to, again, like capture the arbitrage from the TradFi interest in Bitcoin that was only growing over time into this nascent asset class. And so as we kind of rode the train alongside Saylor and really put in our 10,000 hours of work, understood the strategy better, we're able to answer all those questions to ourselves about why does this premium to NAV exist, the MNAV multiple. Is it sustainable? Is it structural? What is BTC yield? Is this a real business, or is it just a temporary arbitrage that he's discovered that would get collapsed when the US spot ETFs went live? And as we're sitting here in 2025, strategy continues to buy Bitcoin almost every week to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars. So not stopping anytime soon. And so his leadership and kind of the playbook he developed for corporate treasurers, for CFOs, and really his encouragement for other people to follow his model and to take this strategy bigger, gave us a lot of conviction for how do we internationalize this strategy. If he can serve that TradFi industry in the U.S. and Wall Street very well, which is to the tune of $100 billion opportunity for him. Where else does this dynamic exist globally? Where is there institutional demand for Bitcoin that can't express that view today? Whether there's no ETFs listed in that market, whether there's structural or regulatory reasons that make it hard to access, or, similar to strategy, is there's just, institutional buyers that have a mandate to only buy corporate equities, common stock, preferred stock. And so that kind of led us to finding Metaplanet in Japan, which was really our first foray into, copying the strategy in a different financial market that had some really unique structural components to it that made it even more attractive, in our opinion, than the US. And so we got connected to Simon, the CEO of Metaplanet, through a mutual friend. In his early days, when he was just thinking about what's a Bitcoin strategy that could help revive this essentially zombie Japanese hotel company at the time. And so got to build a relationship with him, worked with him over a length of time to really hone the Bitcoin strategy, to write his Bitcoin manifesto, to bring on some of our team members like Dylan LeClaire in-house to lead their Bitcoin strategy. We invested in the company in the very first Bitcoin round, and I joined the board of directors of Metaplanet. And we've had just a tremendous ride over the last 12 months as our thesis around the institutional and structural demand for these products played out, I think, even larger and faster than we thought it would in Japan.
The Bitcoin for Corporations Conference is coming to Orlando May 6th and 7th. Receive 20% off admission by going to microstrategy.com, selecting Bitcoin for Corporations, and using discount code KOTZ at checkout, and I'll see you there. This episode is brought to you by Arch Lending, the premier provider of crypto-backed loans designed for both individual and institutional investors. At Arch, your digital assets work for you without selling them. Arch offers flexible loan options tailored to your needs. Backed by industry leaders like Morgan Creek Digital, Castle Island Ventures, and Galaxy Ventures, Arch Lending is setting a new standard in crypto-backed lending. Are you ready to unlock the potential of your crypto assets? Visit archlending.com to learn more and configure your loan today.
Europe's richest Bitcoin heritage site. Prague. BTC Prague. The biggest Bitcoin conference on the continent.
Join us June 19th through the 21st for Bitcoin Prague 2025. Use code KOTZMAN when you buy your ticket at btcprague.com. Hey guys, today's episode is brought to you by StampSeed. If you're in cold storage, you know how important it is to protect your seed phrase. That's why I recommend you head over to stampseed.com and check it out for yourself. This seed phrase storage device is one solid piece of titanium. There are no loose pieces, and you can hammer your seed phrase in letter by letter. When you go to stampseed.com, use promo code TIM15 for a 15% discount across the website. That's TIM15. When you see these companies like Strategy, like Metaplanet, and you see certain figures that now in the community, I don't know whether to call them a meme or larger than life or certainly like celebrities, but like the Michael Saylors and the Dylan LeClairs, they've kind of become, if not already, like on their way to being like larger than life. How do you think through the marketing, the branding of all of this? And then along with that, there's obviously many qualified people that could be a chairman or a CEO or a CFO or a CIO. and they may or may not have the desire or the ability to really communicate the strategy, and to want to be that front person.
Mm-hmm.
How do you see all of that kind of playing out?
I think Bitcoin is very lucky to have the spokesperson that it does, especially in Michael Saylor. Bitcoin's unique because there is no founder around to evangelize for it. There's no Satoshi appearing on Bloomberg TV.
Right.
There's no more Bitcoin Foundation, Bitcoin Corporation to coordinate marketing for Bitcoin adoption. That's something that we've tried to play a small role in and take on some of that mantle really at Bitcoin Magazine, advocating and educating people around it. But Bitcoin needs a lot more spokespeople. And I think, particularly for the Bitcoin Treasury strategy to really be effective, for it to work well, investors have to be able to resonate with the story you're telling, not just about Bitcoin, but about your conviction in Bitcoin long term. And I think that's honestly probably the biggest piece of why strategy was successful, is that Michael Saylor has absolute conviction about Bitcoin, and he can shake your hand and tell you that he's never going to sell his Bitcoin, and you can 100% believe him and trust him on that. So I think we need more Bitcoin spokespeople. And I think, there's, our job of educating the world about Bitcoin is still just getting started. So that means in many different languages. It means appealing to different sets of investors, from the institutional kind of old guard Wall Street folks to the Silicon Valley tech investors, to the, Midwest manufacturing company family office. We need a voice that speaks to each of them individually, and particularly in every language around the world. And so, it's been very encouraging to see rising stars within the Bitcoin community, like Jack Mallers or like Dylan LeClaire, kind of take on that mantle. And we hope to be able to elevate a lot more of those voices, whether at Bitcoin Magazine on podcasts, or whether that's placing them in-house at these treasury companies that we're investors in, where they can be the conduit to the Bitcoin community and be the Bitcoin evangelist and expert in-house at some, traditional listed company that's now adopting a Bitcoin strategy.
I heard today when Michael Saylor was speaking to a group of people, he said at one point, one of the top pieces of advice that he would give to a business owner is figure out how to take your company public and really access those capital markets. What thoughts would you have for a public company executive that might be listening to this, or a private company owner that's listening to this, as far as just things to consider and how to kind of think through all of this?
There are so many different places to think through in terms of actually adopting this strategy at your company. I think you really have to go back to the basics, though, and do your homework. Spend the time to really understand Bitcoin as an asset class and the problem it solves in terms of storing value through time. What makes it special and unique? You have to be able to develop that conviction yourself first and foremost, so that when you're talking to your board, when you're trying to get your CFO and accounting folks on board, that authenticity and that conviction comes through, that the market doesn't perceive it, you being just distracted by this shiny orange object that's an opportunistic short-term thing that you might lose conviction if it falls 30 or 40% and sell your Bitcoins. So you have to put in the work to develop that conviction yourself, and truly understand it, and be willing to make a long-term bet on it, because Bitcoin is not without its volatility. As Saylor says, volatility is vitality, and it's the price you pay for the outsized returns generated by Bitcoin. But you have to have the stomach for that volatility. And then once you have that conviction yourself, I think there's a lot of practical pieces you have to work through about, everything from the accounting treatment, how it's going to impact your GAAP financials, post FASB rules with mark to market and not, what service providers, exchange, custodian you're going to work with, what's your capital raising strategy around acquiring Bitcoin, which is a whole can of worms to unpack in terms of the different financing structures available to you as a public company, debt terms, converts, selling equity, putting your existing cash balance into it, operating cash flows, how you actually go about buying that Bitcoin. And then the last thing, I think, really to your point about communication, is how you're going to message that to the Bitcoin community. Who's your evangelist champion within the Bitcoin world? Who's your director of Bitcoin strategy? How can you actually make it an integral part of your business rather than it being purely a 2% diversifying position across your treasury strategy, which it deserves. That's still a valuable place to start. But once you start there, you've got to ask those questions about how can you actually use it in your underlying business? How can you build your business for Bitcoiners? And now what's the new world of financing vehicles available to you to acquire more Bitcoin?
Yeah, and that could be a really unique position, someone that has conviction and communication that can relate to the Bitcoin community, but also maybe go on mainstream television and the podcast circuit at large and really share that message.
And to plug our team a little bit, at BTC Inc., we have a working group now called Bitcoin for Corporations. That's essentially educational forum. It's a forum for CEOs and CFOs that's all about helping people understand that journey, helping them educate them how to get their CFO and board members on board with it. What are the best practices? Who are the service providers you can work with to write the legal docs or to underwrite your convertible bond or to be able to sell you $100 million of Bitcoin OTC without making a big market impact. And so we really use that to try to convene all the people who are on the fence, bring them together with folks like Michael Saylor, who's our kind of lead partner there with strategy, and Eric Semler and Simon Garovich from Metaplanet, the folks who've taken the plunge and learned those lessons and figured out all the nuances of how to actualize this strategy as a listed corporate, and bring them together with the folks who are trying to get up to speed for private events, for webinars, for education. We really just want to spread the playbook as far and wide as we can and help more companies adopt Bitcoin.
So that's a place that public company executives and other firms in the ecosystem can kind of go to, and it's a partnership between Strategy and Bitcoin Magazine. It's kind of this, like, where do I go to actually, like, I don't just want to fumble through YouTube videos. Like, I need to actually talk to someone and have some resources. And so this alliance and network of Bitcoin for Corporations is really there to be that resource. Is that a fair way to maybe describe it?
That's how we're positioning and how we're trying to help, like bring together some of the most knowledgeable people on this topic, so that the whole industry can learn from them, can ask them questions, can absorb some of the hard-earned lessons that they've already learned, and make it that much easier for the next CEO to be able to sell this to his board of directors or sell this to his general counsel, and give him the tools to make a well-informed pitch about Bitcoin, and then to actually execute the strategy once he's got the buy-in from his shareholder base or his board or his team.
What are you focused on right now? Is there anything in addition to the Bitcoin treasury strategy at UTXO that you're focused on? I know we've talked a little bit about it being event driven, so always kind of on the lookout, but what are you focused on and what's on the dashboard maybe in the near term?
The almost all of our time right now is really spent on this theme of internationalizing the Bitcoin Treasury strategy. So since our success with Metaplanet and then our launch of our Hong Kong listed company, which is 1723 Moon Inc., that announced their very first raise to acquire more Bitcoin last night. We've got a tremendous inbound from teams, projects, listed companies, really in markets all around the world who are interested in executing the strategy. So we've invested in maybe 6 or 7 companies globally who are running the Bitcoin Treasury strategy today. And we're talking with, 10 plus other teams all the way from Australia to Brazil to Europe to Southeast Asia, helping advise them on how to attack this problem, how to structure their capital raising approach, finding the best opportunities where we can be early investors and bring some other funds to the table, and then helping them tell their story to the world once they go out and start buying Bitcoin, and working within their local market. So that's keeping me plenty busy these days as this trend is really accelerating. And I expect by the end of the year, we'll have 20 to 30 companies globally who are running kind of the strategy playbook, in addition to the 80 plus other listed corporates today who are already have some Bitcoin on the balance sheet.
I'll open up the floor to you for any closing thoughts, and of course, where people can reach out to you and UTXO and Bitcoin for Corporations and anything else you want to mention, BTC Inc. Online.
Well, this has been really fun, Tim, and I really appreciate the work you've done with this podcast, with the True North crew, telling the story, helping people do their 10,000 hours of homework and actually understand what the opportunity is here. So really grateful to be here, and for now the groundswell of other funds, investors, institutional allocators, and retail punter Jeffs who are all aboard this train with us. So, to find me pretty easy on X or Twitter these days. Search Bitcoin Magazine, follow it for the best educational content, best coverage of what's happening in Bitcoin. If you search for UTXO Management, you'll find our firm, where we're doing in-depth research on the public company strategies, where we're covering the most exciting technical developments coming out of our portfolio companies. And then you can find myself, I'm Ty Lev on Twitter, or find me on LinkedIn as Tyler Evans. And always down to chat with any company, any investor, any board member who's interested in adopting this strategy at their own company, to help them see the transformative power of Bitcoin for a balance sheet and how we can be helpful.
This has been awesome. We'll have to do it again and periodically, because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of updates and a lot of fun things to cover. Thanks for your time, and great to have you here in New York.
Thanks, Tim.